Welcome to the Tech4Good South West podcast, brought to you by Annie, Alicia and me, Ariel. Here at Tech4Good South West, we're on a mission to build momentum for the Tech4Good movement here in Bristol, Bath, Exeter and across the South West. We're going to be joined by charities, investors, startups and initiatives to share their stories, challenges and successes. For this first ever episode, I'm really excited because I get to interview one of the founders and driving force behind Tech4Good South West, Annie Legge. Hi, Annie.
Hello, nice to be here. Thank you.
Great to be talking to you today. So we decided that over these first 3 episodes, we'll be introducing each of the hosts so that our listeners can find out more about us. So I'm very pleased to be interviewing you today, Annie, and it'd be great if you could start by telling us a little bit about you and what you do.
Yeah, of course. So I'm Annie. I'm co-founder of Dot Project, which is a non-profit designed to really drive digital resilience across the charity sector. And about the time, shortly after founding actually Dot Project, we then really wanted to get involved in the sort of Tech4Good movement. And we launched Tech4Good in Bath actually on the back of only seeing sort of groups meeting up in London. So yeah, that's when it started, probably 2017.
And can you tell me a bit more about Tech4Good South West?
Yeah, of course. So Tech4Good Bath, we launched, as I said, back in 2016, and we shortly after merged with a group that had launched in Bristol. And I guess back then both those groups were sort of deeply affiliated to a global movement around Tech4Good, which was very, very different in different parts of the world, very different in San Francisco and Lusaka in Zambia than it would be in Bath and Bristol. But I guess primarily with that real essence of trying to really drive skills and support the charity sector, particularly around digital. So seeing Tech4Good in how it can enable them, how can it enable their work, and looking at sort of lots of ways of training and providing opportunities for charities, but also looking at new technology and what might really enable them.
So for someone who maybe hasn't been to an event or doesn't know much about it, what sort of things does Tech4Good South West do? What could somebody get involved in?
Yeah, I guess we're sort of shifting it all the time and trying to respond to sort of ever-changing groups of people. But fundamentally, there are sort of learning opportunities. So there's kind of skills building, lunch and learn type sessions that we might typically run online. And that could be anything from how to use Google Analytics, how to choose a CRM. Those are often quite targeted at the charity sector, to more sort of convening events, I guess, really trying to get people together to think about what we might need as a region, thinking about things like digital skills, thinking about diversity, thinking about Tech4Good startups. How can we have more of those? How can we enable those sorts of organisations? And then often case studies. So really showcasing, really interesting initiatives or projects that are happening across the region and occasionally from elsewhere as well, to really inspire us.
And that's really what this podcast is about as well, isn't it, Annie? So this is very new. And I suppose the idea behind this was that we wanted to bring these different voices and we wanted to share stories. Can you tell us a bit more about the podcast and what we hope to get out of it?
Yeah, it's been a long time coming, I think, this one particularly. And I think what we always learn each time is that there's so much happening, and there's in this region alone, even in the city of Bath, Bristol, Exeter and further southwest. And we realise that everybody's got a story, and they're coming along because they have an interest in Tech4Good, whatever that might be. And we really saw actually this podcast could be a really good platform for surfacing what people are doing, what organisations are doing, what initiatives are being launched, and really trying to kind of amplify actually the amazing work, but also the challenges and where actually we need to change things and create different support systems around what people and what organisations hope to achieve.
And focusing a bit on your story now, Annie, it'd be really great if you could tell us a little bit more about Dot Project and how that really came about.
Yeah, of course. So Dot Project really came about through meeting my co-founder, Kat, whose background is in international development. My background is predominantly in the sort of commercial sector around digital and technology. I've always been more in sort of requirements analysis type roles and kind of leading up digital, I guess, within different sectors, different size organisations as well. And we really came together with a kind of desire to do sort of social impact work. But we saw a real gap around the support that was being provided to charities around their sort of internal infrastructure, I guess. Think about the sort of internal foundations around technology. There seemed to be a lot of funding and a lot of momentum around building new technology, building apps, new websites, but very little around that kind of core capacity building, organizational strengthening work. And at the time, we were sort of referring to it as the boring stuff that nobody else wants to do. And it kind of felt like that. And it felt like there's a lot of support from IT specialists. There's a lot of digital agencies out there, and there's a lot of kind of branding marketing specialists, but there didn't seem to be anyone really focusing sort of in the middle and joining the dots. So that was really the sort of heart and the foundation of Dot Project. And over our time, we've really kind of honed in on a particular approach that really brings together the sort of digital competence of teams, so driving that the digital skills and capabilities, but with actually the sort of technical competence as well. So we've got a broad set of practitioners that support Dot Project who have maybe a background as CTO type experience through to sort of organizational coaching and organizational change. So really at the heart of what we're doing is embedding those two mindsets in every piece of work that we do.
And that's quite a challenge, isn't it? I know from my own work that actually quite often people are seeing the end product. I work with quite a lot of charities and they come to us and they say, we want an app or we want a CRM and actually helping people to understand that digital is about a way of working and a mindset and process. It must be quite challenging. Do you come up against that sort of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. And it took us a while, I'd say actually a few years really, to understand that organizations had to be ready to work with us because it's quite disruptive. Because actually what you end up sometimes surfacing is potentially organizational issues, challenges with ways of working, ways of making decisions. And so what we surface can be quite disruptive. So actually, you need to be ready for the change. You've identified as an organization that this is really hard. Digital change is really, really hard. You've potentially, and often we see that they've had some failed implementations in the past, and actually they recognize that it was a lot of factors beyond the technology itself. And those would be the perfect organizations for us to work with. They recognize that it's hard, they want to learn, and they want to change.
And can you give some examples of some of the projects that you might have worked on?
Yeah, we work directly with charities, so where they already have some funding or they have some budget they want to allocate to working on some digital change work. But we also work with funders, and that's been a really big part of our journey because it is about delivering the support, but it's also about advocacy. There seems to be definitely a few years ago like very little funding for this type of work, and as I said before, a lot of funding for building something shiny and new. So for years, a lot of it's also been about advocacy and really trying to understand how the funding system works, trying to get to know some of those funders, and really try to kind of drive a different voice in the conversation around where digital funding can be allocated. So when we work with funders, it's typically with a digital type fund where they've got a number of grantees who've been allocated grants for digital change. And we sort of sit as a partner for the funder and a partner and a support partner for the grantees as well. And often that role is there for a few months. They're typically at least a sort of 6 month, maybe a year program. And we're very, very hands-on in the work. We are practitioners. We bring a lot of different skills. We've got a wide ecosystem of individuals and organizations that we'll bring in, and we deeply recognize where we don't have the skills for a particular organization or a particular aspect of the project they're doing. For example, it could be to do with cybersecurity, or maybe there's something very particular around data governance that really needs a specialist who really lives and breathes the sort of legalities and the complexities of that. So yeah, it's a very much working on those kind of larger funded programs with sort of intermittently working with a number of charities of the sort of varying sizes. I would say typically we work with organisations that don't have they don't have a big enough team of capabilities internally, and that's something that they're looking to move towards. But actually, it's a sort of pathway to get there.
And you obviously do this, and it does cross over very well with Tech for Good Southwest. And it'd be really interesting to hear about what Tech for Good means to you and your organisation.
Yeah, it definitely crosses over, and I'd say that Tech for Good Southwest is much broader than what we do at Dot Project. We have a very specific mission, and it is around sort of charity, social enterprise sector, and Tech for Good for this region as well. It's much broader. We're seeing a lot of Tech for Good startups. We're also seeing a lot more tech organisations actually really trying to look at their sort of social impact and their purpose as well. So it is a lot broader, and that's really what Tech for Good means to me. It's a broad movement around looking at how technology can have a positive impact on the world.
And this is obviously something you're very passionate about. And I think it's interesting because you say that you come from a commercial background. So, what made you want to change, Annie?
Um, I think I think a lot about this now, because probably it was right. It was always there deep inside me that I wanted to be more involved in social impact sector. It just didn't present itself as a choice really early on, and I think you get, at my sort of nice age, you get on a path, and you just kind of follow it, and it seems to be one that you're not supposed to deviate from. So actually, my personal story is one of literally taking that leap, of being in quite a big role at the time. I was head of digital for an organisation called Les Mills, based out in New Zealand, and it was a fantastic role. It was really big. I travelled a lot. I had responsibility within the sort of digital marketing aspect of the organisation, but also increasingly the sort of internal technology and infrastructure, and it became really quite all consuming. And at the time, I also realised that actually I was just getting more and more involved in my work, and less available for my family and for myself particularly. And that's when actually myself and my husband, we had two small boys at the time, we decided to go and volunteer in Cambodia for a few months. We just made it up, really. We did 6 months in Cambodia and then moved to Malaysia for a year. And that was like a deep sort of introspection kind of process of going from this kind of one world of earning money, working really hard during the week, and then being exhausted at the weekends, to actually then literally on the ground going, oh my goodness, this is even harder. Like, this is so hard, but it's so rewarding. And to actually relearn the value of money, to relearn the value of time, to relearn actually what was important in the world, was a big part of me then coming back to the UK, and really determined to not fall back into what I've always done. And that's really hard, because that's your safe space. And I think it was being open to sort of serendipity and meeting Kat, having the role, the sort of consultancy role that I did with her for a while, and then us really exploring our own interests and what we wanted to do. And it feels like, for me particularly, Dot Project was actually bringing the skills that I had from my previous and early career, but into a world that, in a sector that I deeply didn't understand and know. So it's been a really big learning journey, particularly around sort of funding systems and how that works. But yeah, it's been a sort of learning journey into that, but I think also not leaving behind the aspects of what I've done in the past that I've really enjoyed and loved, because I really love the technology sector, and I really love what digital can do and how it can enable. And I think that's, for me, at the heart of what I've always loved about technology. I'm not particularly techie, I'm not hugely creative, but what I love is the enablement part of it. So you and I were talking, Ariel, about sort of transcripts of podcasts, and whether that was something that that you always publish, and actually how enabling that is for many people to have access to content in different ways. And the fact that we've got tools and applications that make that so easy now is just, that's where I get like a real connection and real sort of positivity around, and hope around technology.
Yeah, it's amazing. And I think also in your organisation, I understand that it's not just about the work that you do that has social impact, but actually the way that you're set up, because I know that you're a co-op. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think that links to the journey, my own personal journey, definitely, around often being in quite large hierarchical systems that often weren't sort of freeing enough for individuals in their roles. You were always very, well, that's not in your job description, so you can't talk about that or you can't do that. And being somebody that always wanted to just do what needed to be done, I suppose I found that deeply frustrating. And I think coalesced around a group of individuals, including Kat and the rest of the team at Dot Project, who really wanted to try and do things differently. So we set up as a cooperative, which means that if you're a member of the cooperative, you collectively own and run the business. We have a flat day rate that we all earn the same, whatever your experience, whatever you're bringing to Dot Project. So immediately there's a sense of equality that kind of takes that pain away that we've often all experienced in previous roles. And we have a collective approach to decision making as well. And that's, there's been so much learning around that. It's definitely not been easy, and it isn't easy. When it works, it's just so empowering because everybody feels that they have an equal voice. And that's really, really, really important, I think, particularly in the type of work that we're doing.
It's been brilliant talking to you, Annie, and hearing so much about your journey. And I think I just wanted to end our conversation on sort of thinking about change in sort of Tech for Good, or in the own impact that your organisation is having. So, what change would you most like to see?
So I'm thinking about it more from a regional perspective, and I think we've made some good steps towards that. But what I'd really love to see is a really joined up approach around some of these really important initiatives. So take digital skills, for example, actually, where you see a real cross-sector response to that challenge, where you are working with sort of local authorities, you're working with actually the voices from the charity sector who deeply understand these problems that they see day to day, with the expertise that sits in the technology sector, and with the creative sector as well, who can bring new sort of solutions and ideas and ways of approaching. And I just deeply believe that actually bringing those sectors, bringing the skills and the variety that sits within there, surely there's a way of actually just having some amazing solutions, or at least trying to make things significantly improved across the region.
Yeah, and I feel that because I've only recently started sort of coming to the Tech for Good South West events, previously moving from Wales to Bristol. And it's quite amazing to be in a room with so many different people who are working in tech, people who are working in charities, public sector, and actually all discussing these same issues, things that they want to change about society, things they want to make better. And it just feels like, doesn't it, surely, if you get all of those people together and have conversations, that something good has got to come out of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And you just see people thinking, wow, I hadn't actually thought of that perspective, but now that makes sense. I think the real challenge we've got is how do you build from that? How do you create the sort of systems or ways of coming together where we actually problem solve and work on, or create kind of collective initiatives or ideas, or to actually not just talk about it. And that's the challenge. And I think that's definitely the challenge for Tech for Good Southwest. We've done very well at bringing people together and having some sort of good events for people to share what they want to see change, where they want to see change happen, and what they're really passionate about. But how do you then activate that momentum? I think that's the that's the challenge ahead.
That's the big challenge ahead, but I think you can do it, Annie.
We can do it. We can all do it. Absolutely. But it's baby steps, and actually the fact that we have a good community, we've got active events and things happening, and definitely through this podcast, I think this is a real way of us actually surfacing, as I said, not just amazing stories of what everybody's doing, but actually what are the challenges, and where would change really enable and support a societal issue that we have.
It's been really great talking to you, Annie, and this is the first in a whole series of podcasts, so there are many more to come. Thank you so much, Annie. It's been really fascinating talking to you, and I look forward to more of these podcasts.
Amazing. Thank you for having me.